City Beat TV with another edition of the Pioneer Valley Book Club. And we have the distinctive pleasure to have two fabulous authors in our studios today. And one is named Kaolin, and the other one is Martha Johnson. And I want to say hello to both of you ladies.
Hi.
All right.
Nice
So we're going to get started, and we're going to talk to you first, Kaolin. And we want to know if you could just tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to write this intriguing book.
Okay. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I've lived in Northampton for more than 20 years now. Most of us don't know our African American history, and at the time that was especially true, but it still is true today. And so I thought, gee, I think that I can teach something on this subject. My family is interracial, and I decided to start a course called Let's Talk About Race. What we talked about in class was the mundane aspects of racism, and we used the historical aspects of racism as a backdrop to people's immediate experiences of racism, whether they had participated in it or whether or not they were oppressed and victimized by it. So the point was to actually have an area in which people could be at ease with discussing the truth about the violence of racism. I happen to consider racism murder. I have always considered it murder. It diminishes the quality of life for people of color, and it has always done that. And so I've always considered it an act of violence. So why the violence, and how many layers of violence, and how does that get expressed? Well, it does through systemic, structural, blatant, subtle racism, a variety of different ways. Who has cared about it? Not too many people. Many people have not cared, with the exception of people of color. So one of the reasons why I designed the course was to have white people get more comfortable discussing this tremendous omission of their humanitarian effort, because many white people consider themselves humanitarians. And I thought, let's see how can you match that ideal with reality when we're talking about racism specifically, because the problem with racism is that white privilege endows us with certain ways and manners and forms of behavior and certain kinds of security system that people of color don't experience. And then we needed to discuss systemic white privilege and how that affects us, and what can we do? We cannot change the color of our skin. We are still going to be benefiting no matter what we think or how we feel. Somehow or other, we are in that box where we are benefiting just by virtue of our color. So in a way, we need to discuss, so how do we cope with that? That means that's going to require some other kind of coping mechanism when we become really conscious of it. And through that consciousness, when we start to make decisions that we need to make for ourselves, because in our environment, we're not going to find other people who have made those decisions that we are going to be needing to make. I have found a lot of younger students were very frightened when they looked, white students were very frightened when they looked at the general climate of the country and thought, my aunt didn't start out a racist, but she ended up one. My mother didn't think she was, but she is. And then what is racism really, and what's going to happen to me then? If it's that powerful that these people think they're not and they are, or they thought they wouldn't become one, but now they're justifying stereotypes and prejudices, what's going to happen to me? Because I'm only 21 and 22, and I don't want that. I don't want that for me. So what's happened? And so in class we would discuss that. And develop skills, learn how to use the racial equality muscles, what I refer to it as, using the racial equality muscle. You do that through the dialogue, you do it through stepping up, you do it through acknowledging, you can do it through writing, you can do it through your choice of relationships, you can do it through your choice of intimate relationships, you do it through the necessary cross-cultural communication in which you are learning, I am no better than the next person.
Exactly.
So, and I do think that institutions are responsible for that. Of course they're responsible for that. And so that was the point of my work, and the book has a writing interval in the book with questions, so you can answer these specific questions for you, so you can go through this process of transformation. And it has many of the students' quotes and work in the book.
Just curious as to what your feeling is as we go through now with a transformation in our political system, and the climate is heightening with race and
Oh,
tension.
absolutely, yes.
And just wanted
Thank you, thank you. I'll be happy to answer that question. I also want to add that I work with the National Organization for Women on their Combating Racism Committee, and I actually want to give a shout out to Joycelyn Morris, who's an amazing woman who happens to be black, who's incredibly important to me and has promoted my work, and I want to thank her. I think things are absolutely devastating now, absolutely exasperating. I have a second book coming out in a couple of months called Protocol, Welcome to Paradise, Watch Your Step. I started it 3 years ago. It was specifically to interview African American men who live in Northampton, Massachusetts, and the racism that they've been subjected to there. And then continuing to explain sundown towns, and it has many African American athletes and educators and psychologists who in the last 250 years are talking about their experience of being black in this country and how absolutely petrifying it is. So in answer to your question, what has happened now is an incredible hostility and distrust even of me among blacks, because in a way I assert myself in a way which takes them by surprise, and then often, and we are talking stereotypes now, so this is generic and I need to, there are times when within context it can be individual, and there are times when it has to be a more generic answer to this kind of a question. So I'm going for the more generic. But there's been too much trauma. There's been too much trauma in black culture. Too much post-traumatic stress, which again, we didn't expect this reversal of fortune. We really didn't quite respect it. So no one was prepared to deal. And since institutions weren't really dealing with racism anyway, they definitely weren't going to be dealing with the escalation of it. That was never going to happen.
Right.
So that was a humongous disappointment. That was just, and also not just a disappointment, that means more of your survival stuff is going to kick in, and more distrust and more fear, and with good reason. So now it's become harder and harder to trust white people. This is my interpretation, and I'm white, and that's what I'm saying. I remember in the 70s, we were all excited. My children are black, and we were thrilled in our circle in Brooklyn, for the word diversity. I've found it's been watered down, it's been whited out. I call those things whited out. And so we were kind of enthused that the exposure to integration, the caring about it politically, there's certain laws changed. Music definitely influenced the fantasy that racism was not going to be here to stay. But I think part of what we learned from that experience is exposure to integration does not make for an integrated psyche. The problem is of the mind. The problem is psychological. Racism is psychological. And so therefore, exposure, even in an integrated environment, doesn't mean people even talking to one another, let alone feeling safe with one another.
Right.
So the problem is then stereotypes. How did stereotypes come to be? Which particular stereotypes were enforced in your environment? Which ones are you most comfortable with? Hey, I don't see a lot of people that uncomfortable with their stereotypes. I don't see it, with their prejudices. I don't see that. That's a comfort zone. It's a comfort zone that unfortunately is real distortion. It's a real distorted focus on reality, because it's a comfort zone that every culture relies upon. Every culture relies upon some level of their own comfort zone, because they get it. They get what it is to be who they are and be of their culture. And somehow or other that has to be distilled. Somehow or other we can't rely on that as a safety net, because if we do, no matter how together we get cross-culturally, we're going to go back to our own. And we go, that person is crazy. What happened?
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you know what goes with that? Your interest, your motivation, the trust. There's no trust. And in addition, I wanted to say that regarding talking about race, people are resistant to talking about race if their lives do not depend upon it. And at this point in time, and for a very, very long time, people of color's lives have depended upon it. When I was raising my children of color, we actually did role-playing and preparation for going outside, for going on the subway. What happens if somebody accuses you? What do you do? So the assumption was never that you would rebel or fight back. It was that you would use your thinking, you would think first, and then you would call us, their father or I, at the first opportunity, or ask that we be called. And this is before cell phones, so it wasn't quite as easy right now as it is today. And but we had that preparation. It's a life-saving skill. It's an absolute necessity, and many authors and many people refer to it now as the talk. You had that talk.
Yeah.
If you're a color, you got to watch your back. And we're going to show you how to do that and how to be prepared, even if you're 7, 8, 9, 10. And so people of color that I know, and these women had mentioned that to me, when another white person said, people don't want to talk about race, we don't want to talk about race. And they said, what do you mean you don't want to talk about race? We do. We want to talk about race because our lives depend upon talking about race.
Right.
If we don't talk, and so later for whether or not race is a social construction or not, later for whether or not there's only one race, the human race,
Right.
later for that. As soon as white supremacy is dismantled in this country and we no longer have to worry about racism, that's when I feel at liberty to go, you're right, there's no such thing as race. There's only one race, human race. Till then, till that moment takes place, this is what I'm talking about.
And Kaolin, where can we find out more about you and your books online?
Yes, I have a website. It is www.ltar.biz. I am also on Facebook, and my book is sold on Amazon and all the local indie bookstores and Barnes & Noble, all over the place.
Wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very
Kaolin.
much. I appreciate
And
it.
we're going to be right back with more from our other guests here on City Beat TV. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back right after this.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
And we're back on City Beat TV, and now we're sitting here with another book author. Her name is Martha Johnson, and Martha's a good friend of mine. We go back a little ways, and we talked when you first wrote your first book, Martha, and it was called Why Not Do What You Love? And I was really intrigued right from the beginning with the title, because that's one thing that we don't do enough of.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Now, what inspired you to write the book?
Well, I'll give you the real reason. I wrote the 3 books that you see here are books that I wrote for myself, which I don't know how many authors can say that, because they're very personal. And when I wrote these books, I had no way of knowing, because I was ill, I had received a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis, and so when I wrote these books, I had no way of thinking that I would even be able to go out and give a reading in a bookstore. So I just said what I needed to say. But in particular, this Why Not Do What You Love was the inspiration of a trip to Brazil that I took. I was really trying to heal my condition in alternative ways, and I went to visit what some of your listeners may know, John of God in Brazil, a renowned medium and healer. And in meditation one day, I got the notion that if you don't write what you know, you will never heal. 9 months later, this book was ready to be published.
Wow.
And then I started healing. So, in reflection, though, in the other answer to your question is that I have always been fascinated with doing what I wanted to do in life. In fact, I've got to say, I'm kind of stubborn. But so doing what I wanted to do in life was important to me. And I noticed that, particularly around the time that I was writing this book, it was the recession in 2009. And I noticed how many people were talking about how much they hated their jobs, but they had to stay with it because they didn't know. And oh my goodness, what's that about? Let's at least, if we can't get a job doing what we love, as I have always managed to do, at least let's think about doing a bit more of what we love.
That's a great point. And speaking of writing, you're embarking on a new book, I believe.
Yes, and this is interesting because I'll just show you this.
Okay.
That's about as far as I've gotten. But
Rest of your life.
as I am now 1 month shy of being 77, and this book is different from all of these books. Because number one, I have energy. Number two, I am committed as I entered the years of elderhood or aging or in thinking about how do I want to live the rest of my life, and realizing that there are a lot of 60-year-olds out there, 55, 60, 65, who hit that age and say, what am I going to do now? Because we weren't brought up with the notion that we'd have 20 or 30 more years to do something with.
Right.
And it's not about the gold watch, and it's not about retirement. It's about, I think, three things. And that's what this next book is going to be. It's about how do I live fully.
Yes, exactly.
It's about also, given that I am aging, how do I age gracefully? How do I take care of myself and my body and my mind and my connections and my community, which is, research is telling us that it's community and connections
right.
which are the biggest boon to our health and livelihood. And the third thing is, how do I befriend my death? I don't plan to be in the hospital arguing with the doctor
Right.
or having my family argue with the doctor about what kind of treatment that would allow me to have 6 more months.
Yeah.
What about quality of life?
There you go.
So we're talking about some things that, again, people are a little nervous about talking about, but you know what? I've learned one thing for me, and I guess that's what I want to share in the book, is that contemplating death, knowing that we do not have forever,
Right.
focuses our life. At least it did for me. And my brother died 2.5 years ago. So many people in the Springfield community know him, Bruce Johnson. He was active in the community music school, played the guitar all over town.
Okay.
And he was Balthazar in the Three Kings.
Oh.
Anyway, he died unexpectedly. And I came home after his celebration. And I said to myself, all right, you know what? I am going to die. It was sort of an abstraction before, but now it was real.
Yes.
And this was my younger brother.
Okay. Wow.
And I said to myself, all right, if I have 15 more years, I just put an arbitrary number on it. I figure I got enough money to last till 90 perhaps, hopefully.
Right.
If I've got 15 more years, how am I going to use those years? And my answer came up immediately. You're going to use those years to end your life well, live fully, age gracefully, and befriend the death. And you're going to use those years helping other people do the same.
Oh, awesome.
So since then, I've really kind of been exploring these questions. I've run some discussions at Holyoke Senior Center and helped to start a program on these questions at Holyoke Community College. And finally getting to the place where, yeah, I'd like to write it. I'd like to share this journey
Okay.
in hopes that other people will also start thinking about this part of their life journey.
And I think this is a great segue to the next topic.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you could just tell us a little bit about the program, Living Fully
Sure.
55.
This is the second year of the program, and I had been teaching Why Not Do What You Love at Holyoke Community College twice a year, 3-session program, and I'm still doing that. But I went up to them and I said, you know, later life is not just about doing what you love. Aha, you know, it was an aha moment for me. It's not just about doing what you love.
Right.
So this is incomplete because there's about aging, there's about dying, and there's about the things you need to start talking about so that your life can be peaceful, purposeful, meaningful, fulfilling. And so some of those things, where do we find places to talk about those things? And so at the time we started this program, there was virtually no place to talk about these things. So there are some very important single sessions on Alzheimer's, how to work with an Alzheimer's person. There's another session on just exploring your legacy. There's another session on why not do what you love, the piece that I am fascinated with. There's another session on downsizing. How do we think about that? There's another session about how do you determine whether you should move and when you should move and to where you should move and how do you evaluate the places that are around. And so a lot of these questions that we never thought we'd have to deal with,
That's true.
we have to deal with them.
Eventually, yeah. Right.
And I have attended all the classes myself because I kind of coordinated the instructors, and they're fabulous. They're absolutely fabulous.
Outstanding.
So I encourage this. They start in February. It's how to use your how to tap your Social Security. There's a wonderful class by an elder lawyer, and that's a long class, 3 sessions. But you want a very inexpensive way to check out why you need a lawyer and what questions you need to ask a lawyer. It's a wonderful session.
Is there any information online yet about the program at all?
This HCC program, the best way, I'm going to give a number here, is 552-2123. The if they go online, it's easy to find. Holyoke Community College is the community service programs.
Where can we find out more about you and your books online?
Well, the best place is www.meetmarthajohnson.com. I'll say it again, www.meetmarthajohnson.com. And my books are on Amazon. My books are available locally, inquire at a bookstore. And what I am doing now, other than a little bit of teaching, is I am working with, I call myself a life journey guide. I call myself a journey mentor.
Okay.
Because that's how I'm seeing my own life, how I'm talking about my own life and helping others to make sense of theirs. But what I am doing is I am meeting with, actually it's, as it's turned out, a variety of ages, but I started out with the intention to work with the 60 people over 60 who are coming to that what next question and thinking, okay, what are the variety of ways I need to think about my life in order to have the remaining years be fulfilling? So, but I've discovered that, this material is for anybody who's reflective and thinking about their life.
Oh, absolutely.
When I wrote this book, I didn't follow book writing wisdom because I wasn't a book writer, and I wasn't even a writer at the time. So I said, well, I'll just write for myself. But what I found out is, and really in any kind of book you're supposed to target an audience, but what I found out is that there were some 22-year-olds who loved this book. One kept it in her backpack while she was traveling through Europe because she was after college and before whatever, and the
Right.
whatever wasn't appearing. This was during the recession. An 80-year-old man called me. He was my neighbor. I'd given him a copy. And he said, "Martha, your book affirmed my whole life because it told me why I have been so successful and why I have loved my life so much. And I didn't know that I did all the right things." So, you know, who's it for? The reflective person,
Yeah.
particularly people who kind of in transition to the next phase of whatever their life is going to be.
When I first met you, you were stricken with scoliosis.
Multiple sclerosis and scoliosis, yeah.
Yeah. And you look just as marvelous now as you did back then. So,
Better.
yeah, that's true too. So I'm just curious as to, it seems like your life is on the inside as well as the outside is going well.
Yes, and that's what propelled me to think about Musing number 3. Because what I've noticed is a period in life has closed, particularly prior to the death of my brother, just prior. And that's when the whole new thing started. And so the last 5 years, and probably during the time that I met you, there were a lot of changes. Really getting back my energy, using alternative methods to begin to heal multiple sclerosis, and selling my house, moving to Providence Place, which is senior living, when I was the youngest one. So there were lots and lots of changes during those years. So I feel like prior to my new latent life mission, there are some years that I want to document in Musing Along the Way, Volume 3. I hope it's the last, but it may not.
We're going to have you back when that next book is done.
I would love it. I would love it. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Well, there you have it. That's Martha Johnson. And we'll be right back with more City Beat TV right after this.
La 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 la, I love you so. I love you, I love you. La 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 la, la 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 la.
We're here.
Yay!
It's a short drive from your neighborhood to your naturehood. To find a neighborhood park or green space near you, visit discovertheforest.org.
Just watch.